the simplicity, but like the brilliance of just like a bait and switch twist. Like we take that for granted because we've evolved since
Right.
then.
Also, like at that time, just how shocking like cross-dressing was, for example.
Yeah.
Or like female, like a female cutting someone's head off. Those things from those two movies were like extremely shocking back then.
Yeah, I mean, they're still shocking,
Sure.
but I mean, I can only imagine being an audience member back then and seeing, I mean, shit, to see even The Exorcist, my mom still like tells me to this day, like,
Right.
there's no way to understand how much that movie impacted audiences psychologically. The closest that I can come to is like Jaws, because I
Well,
know, I remember seeing Jaws like early as a kid. It had already been out, but like the impact it had on the collective psyche and still has today on sharks and all of that, like I can't imagine 50, 60 years ago.
oh yeah, and I often think, my favorite film is Alien. So I often think, because I've heard a lot of stories about when it was first released, like how visceral and intense it was. Like people were literally crawling out of the theater down the aisle, like to get out, or they were vomiting. Like, could you imagine that ever happening today? It just does not happen today. So like to go back in time and see Alien for the first time, or The Exorcist, or some of these films that had that level of intense reaction, just it's like mind blowing. But
Yeah,
how,
it is. Yeah, I mean, I've obviously been anesthetized and have become numb to gore and horror to a certain extent, well, to an extreme extent. And I think that's why movies like, I mean, this is a good segue into Midsommar, and I think that's why movies like Hereditary and Midsommar, The Witch, which Marissa and Sean made me watch,
oh,
like
that's great.
more heady, like philosophical, metaphysical, like deep, like we need that because like Blood and Guts isn't doing it for us. Like we need something to like awaken our inner trauma. It's gotten to that point, for better or worse. That's a different
Right,
conversation. It's a good segue.
because they're so much more sophisticated now. But yes, let's transition to Midsummer. So you lead in on that and tell me
Okay.
what I think you're. I've only seen it once, but it's still fresh with me. But I think you're gonna have more. I think you're gonna have more thought on it than I've had so far.
Well, I went back yesterday and a little bit this afternoon and just like read like, theories and just I was just reading shit. But for those of you that aren't familiar, Midsummer is the second directorial effort from Ari Aster, who made Hereditary, which came out in 2018, 2017. And you've seen Hereditary, yes? I can't remember if we talked.
I watched it before. I watched it after I saw Midsummer and before we did this, so that I would be like caught up.
Okay, just so, well, I want to circle back to that in just a second, just get your general thoughts on Hereditary, because there might be some overlap between the two. But
Right.
Midsummer, where Hereditary is very much, it's not like a slasher horror movie, obviously, if you've seen it, if you haven't. It's layers upon layers upon layers. You can watch it multiple times and excavate something new each time. I actually didn't like Hereditary the first time I saw it, and the reason being is because everyone kept selling it as the new Exorcist. Like, this is our generation's Exorcist, and I went into it like expecting more of like a jump and scare, and it was not that. So it took me like watching it 2-3 times to really appreciate the brilliance of it, and separate it also from the Rosemary's Baby tropes, because it was also kind of marketed as like the new Rosemary's Baby too. So of course that was an influence and there are similarities, but like to really like digest that movie was like 2-3 watches for me.
Right.
And then Midsommar, same thing. I'm gonna need to watch it a couple more times, but first impressions on Midsommar were wow. Like I definitely left the theater with Midsommar like more shooken than I was with Hereditary, because I knew now what this guy was about as a director, and I knew like what kind of film I was gonna walk into. I loved it. I loved it. So I mean, you can dive in, and then we can maybe, or should I maybe give like a light overview of the plot, you think?
Sure.
Just like a tight, okay. So the plot is you have this young woman, she's a grad student. Her family has just died. She is dealing with a lot of trauma. She's depressed. She has this boyfriend, your typical, like, as Chad used earlier, like the cardboard cutout version of a completely dumb, disconnected, oblivious white male boyfriend, like just laid out. Almost a caricature of, just like in Straight Jacket, and his friends, and they decide to go to Sweden for a Midsummer festival because one of the gentlemen in the friend group is from there and suggests the idea, and suggests that it might be therapeutic for her to accompany them. So they basically land in Sweden in the middle of effing nowhere, with two other random people, and immediately like horror commences. Everything is beautiful visually. You are in the middle of a Nordic environment. There's runes everywhere. There's Nordic imagery and mythology, just like in the texture of everything in this movie. Everybody in the movie except for one person is white. There's one black guy in the friend group that comes because he's writing his thesis on Nordic mythology or something, I can't remember. And it's just the psychological unfurling of the friend group, specifically the female lead, played by Florence Pugh, as they witness the customs and rituals of this community. Is that it? I think that's it.
Yeah, that's basically it. And I thought they're disturbing films. Do you draw any parallels between him and like a Lars von Trier?
Ooh,
That's
that's
I
a good
yeah,
question.
yeah, I kept thinking of films like Antichrist, all those Lars von Trier films. Like it has that same like no BS, like just very serious. I want to say like a dire, like a sense of just like dread that's like so relentless in a way. But I do think Midsommar is more sophisticated visually, like a lot more sophisticated visually. I don't know if it's just the director or if it's also like the cinematographer or he put more time in on that side of it. Hereditary, I think, is like a great film, but I don't think there's anything groundbreaking how it's visually told.
Okay.
Whereas Midsummer, like it's the visual is married to the subject more, I think, and it's more over the top visually. It's obviously more hallucinogenic, with them taking drugs and the grass growing through their hands and stuff like that. But even just like the color grading in it, I don't know if it's because it's more of an outdoors film, and Hereditary is like an indoors film in a lot of ways. But I just thought like visually it was amazing. Visually, Midsummer was, and like if you really enjoy like practical effects and gore, there's like some amazing stuff in Midsummer. Just to not be cerebral for a minute, but just to appreciate like the head smashing gore that's in this film. And they don't just show it to you like once, they show it to you like 2-3 times from different angles, close-ups, and it's just like when I was a kid, I would see horror movies or gore and I would be like, why don't they really show it? Well, this film like really shows it. So just be careful what you ask for. But
Yeah.
I thought it was
Trigger warning. Yeah.
I thought they were interesting moments though. But they are unsettling films, and I don't know if it's just his like take on things, but it just leaves you like feeling not good in a way at the end of some of them. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. So it leaves you feeling not good. Both movies, especially on rewatches, as far as Hereditary is concerned. The, Let me take a step back. You mentioned like the sense of like you use the word dire. Like when you watch Hereditary and when you watch Midsommar, especially if you've seen Hereditary and then you see Midsommar and you kind of know like what you're dealing with in terms of the director. There's foreboding from like the opening scenes of like this is gonna be hardcore, impending doom. Uh, this is not going to end well for the white folks, and certainly not for the black guy. But yeah, the sense of foreboding is there. But to your point or your question about Lars von Trier, that is not even something that had crossed my mind. So thank you for asking that, because I think Lars von Trier might be one of my top 5 filmmakers. Melancholia, I was actually just writing about Melancholia last night, is probably in my top 10 films of all time. The no bullshit, the like impending doom, the sense of like just the weight. Like you're just on the watching these movies and there's just weight on you and there's weight in the audience. It's just, again, I don't know if it's obviously a collaborative effort between the cinematography, the scoring of the film, the directing, costuming, all of that. But yeah, I think in terms of just mood, like intense mood and like no bullshit, yeah, very Lars von Trier. And in terms of practical effects, yes. Midsommar, where Hereditary, I think, gives it to you with the decapitation for sure, but that's like so quick. It's like, like it's so shocking and fast. I mean, violent, but shocking and fast. It's just like not even a second of film. And then maybe at the end when she's stabbing herself, but Midsommar, yeah, I mean, you're seeing faces get bashed in at every angle, and
Midsommar definitely takes it to the next level. I would argue that Midsommar is the better film for a lot of reasons, but I think if you're looking at his skill in like really getting down what he's trying to get down, I think like onto film, I bet you that he would say Midsommar is a lot closer to like his vision than he was able to get with Hereditary. I just think it's more skillful and there's a lot of nuances. Like when you mention like cinematography and like all those different elements that scoring and all that, I think all of it is a little tighter and more dialed and more like in concert with each other in Midsommar.
I agree. I mean, as far as like visually stunning, I think it definitely goes to Midsommar in terms of like the technical prowess that it took to achieve it. Definitely Midsommar. With Hereditary, though, I mean, with those miniatures, just the building of those miniatures, and then the way that the miniatures meld into reality, I think was very stunning. But yes, I think the award goes to Midsommar on that, and also the fact that it's a horror movie shot in broad daylight the entire time.
Right.
And I'm wondering,
like it's beautiful in so many ways. The colors, the brightness. Whenever film is like exposed that bright, it just makes you feel like it's just so beautiful. But it still has that like dire sense of dread in every frame, which is kind of amazing.
Yeah, to be able to accomplish that, I don't know how one does it, but I mean, there is like this where Hereditary was very claustrophobic. This felt very like agoraphobic to me. Like it was just wide open. Everything is there. Like you should be able to see like that you're in trouble or that the people on the screen are in trouble. Like, but it's so well done that you don't see it coming until you've been blood eagled in the barn. And I just learned what blood eagling is. It's not a sexual euphemism, but I was reading that it's actually where when they, spoiler alert, when they start to discover like the friend group is disappearing and then they see the bodies there towards the end and they're all like dismembered and their rib cages are exposed. That's based partially at least on a real Nordic or Viking at least tradition called Blood Eagle, where they would sever the torso, sever the head, and then take the lungs. And you know that scene in Silence of the Lambs where Hannibal Lecter escapes from the cage and he takes the guard and puts him up with that's a blood eagle, basically.
Oh, wow.
So, and then all of the runes, like just how much research he does in terms of steeping it in authentic like culture and mythology is amazing.
So I have something to ask you about Midsommar. So, as someone who's, you know, very of the times we're living in, which are equality, Me Too, all those times.
All those times.
Well, you
all
know,
of the times, all of the movements,
cultures,
yeah,
sensitivity to how cultures are portrayed. Like, I know that, you know, I don't think, what was it, Sweden where they went?
I'm pretty sure, unless I'm being super racist and it's Switzerland, I think it's Sweden. Let me.
But anyway, so they go to Sweden, and it's like from articles I've read, Sweden, you know, Swedish people are a little bit taken aback by like our white USA cinema view of, you know, their land and their. Okay, so
taken aback in what way?
Well, because the ceremonies and traditions that you see in Midsommar are actually based on real ones that,
right,
of course are not, you know, demonic or terrible or bloody or evil. So on the one hand, you have to like suspend disbelief and be like, okay, it's a movie. Let's give them creative license. But then we're living in a sensitive era, right? Where it's almost like the way they're portraying this very real place and these very real cultures and traditions, it's kind of blatantly disrespectful too. So I just want to hear like your thoughts on all that.
I think that's a really great point, and I'm still trying to qualify if it's Sweden or Switzerland. It gives the name of the village, but regardless, I'll make sure I get to that before the video's over. But yes, I mean, in the times of like PC culture, and God forbid you say the wrong thing,
right?
Either, you know, your intentions are great or you're making it
politically correct.
Yeah, there's especially, I mean, not especially, even with art and especially in comedy, like we're not even leaving room for people to like crack jokes anymore. Like everything is eggshells. And to me, I think that's part and parcel of like a course correction that is happening with the universe. But with anything, you know, the pendulum is swinging way too far to one side as it tries to like come back to center. But I think we should be giving creative license. I think we should. And, you know, you could make the same argument about Frozen. Frozen is an amalgamation of Nordic and Scandinavian cultures, and it's a fictionalized universe that they've created, you know, Arendelle or whatever the hell it's called. Like, it's an amalgamation of that region, and it's watered down and it's whatever into this fictionalized thing. And this is, you know, could be construed as something disrespectful, you know, because we are taking some very real, benign, beautiful rituals that have existed for millennia. Well, maybe not millennia, I don't know, but at least for hundreds of years, generations rather.
Thousands of years.
And we're making them into, you know, we're demonizing them, we're turning them into fodder for a horror film. So I think it's you can make a case for either point, right? But at the end of the day, if you're going to see a comedian, or you're going to go watch Frozen, or you're going to go see Midsommar, you need to suspend your disbelief. Right. I mean, that's part of what you do, right? You look at
right. And I think the director's operating with the mindset of, I'm just going to assume that the audience has like a base level of intelligence, that this is fiction and it's not real. I just feel bad for anyone that kind of is actually scared of other cultures after watching this film, or being like, oh man, I'll never go to Europe because of that. There are probably people that say that after watching this film.
Listen, no joke, I felt that way after watching Hostel for the first time. I was like, you will not find my ass in Croatia. I'm just not going there. Like, I'm not going to end up in Croatian Hostel. Oh, it is Sweden. It is Sweden.
Okay, cool.
But
that's what I just didn't want to misspeak. And
yeah, no, and thank you for checking us on that. But I mean, because
cultures, so.
Yeah, and if we do decide to share this with the public, I mean, we can open that up for comments. Like, it would be interesting to hear from people that are from that region or of that descent, like if they feel.
It's really interesting because we are living in an outrage culture, and certain things just draw like outrage instantly, whereas other things it's a little more like muddy of a territory. Like, hey, is this? I mean, I don't think we should jump to outrage in any case, but it's just interesting that certain cultures are like fair game more, and other cultures are like, don't you dare. You know what I mean? It's interesting.
Well, but, I'm gonna send this link to you, and I'll post it in the description when this goes up. But there's one of the articles I was reading prior to getting online with you was a Roger Ebert recap and review, and they talk about not exactly this question, but the idea of like, did Ari Aster have a conscious intention of filming this horror situation in a white culture where everything is white, not just the people, but the landscape, the clothing, everything is it a commentary on race? And also you have, the black guy there, and, like, how deep do you go down that rabbit hole? I don't know, but they asked that question, like, is this a commentary on, I won't be able to find the exact quote,
so,
but
would it be more offensive, like, if, say, it was set in, like, Africa, and it was like white people going to visit like a black culture, and they were all like, doing terrible things, which actually does happen in some places.
Right, and whether or not it's more offensive, and it probably would be more offensive, obviously, if you set this in an African setting, but regardless of whether it is or it isn't, the outrage would definitely be more if it was in a black or African or marginalized community setting versus white people, the whitest of the white.
Whitest of the white, yeah. Well, those people are welcome in our country now, didn't you hear? I mean, they're welcome.
Yeah.
It's just not brown people.
I know. We've come a long way-ish.
According to orange people, white people are okay, but not brown people.
Yeah, baby steps, Chad, baby steps.
Yeah.
No, I mean, we can go a little bit longer if you want, but the one thing that I was reading in the same Guardian article where the gentleman, I think it's a gentleman that wrote this article, actually interviewed Ari Aster last year after Hereditary, and he had already made Midsommar, it just hadn't come out yet, and Ari Aster was quoted as saying, "Midsommar is a Wizard of Oz for perverts." So there is a reason to watch this movie now, with it being a commentary or a subversion of the Wizard of Oz narrative, with Danny, the main girl's character, being Dorothy, and then you have the inept boyfriend as the dumb scarecrow without a brain. You have the Tin Man, the cowardly lion. And they say that there's even a part in the movie, and I don't remember this, but they're like walking down a path and it's all yellow flowers. So there's the yellow brick road. There, much like in Wizard of Oz, there's witchcraft in some form or fashion. There's a storm. I don't remember a storm taking place in Midsommar, but that might be like a loose term for something else going on. And then hallucinogenics. In Wizard of Oz, they're in the poppy field, so.
Right. The storm could be, her tumultuous situation where her family is killed, and then by her sister, and then how she's being treated by her boyfriend. Like her life is a storm. It's a tornado.
Absolutely. And I think that's the main similarity with
Oz, which is, in this beautiful place in Sweden.
Yeah. And I think that's the main similarity that I found with Hereditary is, well, you have a female lead, right? And but you have like this familial or generational PTSD or traumatic event that's the eye of the storm, as it were. Um, but I wanted to ask you, going back to your question about like, outrage culture and, is this exploitative or is it not or whatever? Do you find that, because I found the movie to be very campy as well, where Hereditary is not. This movie has like laughable moments. I mean, the audience that I saw it with was laughing out loud at some points, maybe not because they got the joke, but because it was weird and awkward scenes and like the ritualized sex scene. I mean, there's just absurd moments, and I'm wondering if the campiness of it was intentional to balance and let the audience know, hey, don't take it too seriously.
I didn't pick up on that personally. I think when they laugh, maybe it's because it's uncomfortable, because they're like, this is so awkward or so odd. But I wouldn't say camp. I would just say awkward or odd, personally.
Okay.
But, I see what you mean though, but yeah, that's just what I think.
So what do you think about the ending? Like, do you feel like there's
so I thought when she
is a twist? Like, yeah.
Right. When she smiles at the very end, it's too like, it's like when you wrap a present, you pack it, you put it in the box, you close the box, you put the wrapping paper on, and then you tie the bow. Like, the smile was like him tying the bow at the end. But it was too tidy. Like, it was just, I think it was like too, there was something not right about it, I felt like. It was not, maybe predictable is not the right word, but it was just too something at the end when she smiles.
Okay.
I almost think if she just kept staring and that's it, it would have been better than if she smiled. But I get that there's a very specific reason for the smile. It's very intentional. It's showing that she's okay with what's happening.
Right.
It's showing after everything that's happened to her, she's getting her revenge or whatever at the very end, and that she's okay with it. And if she didn't smile, you almost wouldn't know that she was into what was happening,
right,
in a way. But it didn't seem like her to me. Do you know what I mean?
I do, and I think that's why I need to rewatch the movie like 10,000 more times. This particular article talks about the smile in detail, and it talks about it in the context of this particular author of the article is suggesting that the movie's a fairy tale, and that even if you aren't like looking at it through like the Wizard of Oz lens, not that the Wizard of Oz is a fairy tale, but that it's a fairy tale. Like, she's, the piece of shit boyfriend that wasn't good to her is dead. Like, she's the maypole queen. Like, she's the queen now. All of the shitty people in her life are gone. The trauma is gone. She can be a villain, a good girl. Like, she's just like, it was a catharsis. And that the smile at the end for me was like just very Mona Lisa-ish. It was just like, what is she thinking, right? Like, it's
also challenges you to abandon your concept of what's safe, comfortable, and normal. So it's almost like that's her new normal, right? And it's almost like everything she thought she needed, whether it was family or her home or her blanket, her room, her bed, all these things that we think of as like comforts, that it makes it's okay to kind of let them all go.
Yeah, and I think that's why as for somebody that, or anyone that has done hallucinogenics, I think that's why introducing that element into the film is very relevant, because that's what hallucinogenics help you to do, is to let go of attachment to things that are unnecessary in
all these things that I'm attached to.
Right? As
my nostalgia.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think that seeing it as a fairy tale is like an interesting lens to look at it through.
I love the Wizard of Oz thing. That was totally new to me.
Yeah,
But it makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
but yeah, I really just like the idea of that's one thing I wanted to say is like that when she's hallucinating earlier on in the movie and she sees like the flowers and vines growing through her skin or coming out of her body was very reminiscent of Annihilation for me. When Thompson's character becomes the shimmer and the same thing is kind of happening to her, I was like, oh, I wonder if he took a page consciously from what's his face's book, or if it was just a happy coincidence. But yeah,
that's a great point. Because not only do you have like the imagery of the grass growing through her hand, but you have all of that like continuous imagery toward later in the film of where everything around the characters is sort of like swimming around in place.
Very psychedelic.
And they do that a lot, like, but not at first. They do it more a little bit later.
Well, she's also taking more they're drugging them more and more throughout the course of the movie.
So they're like really living in it once all that starts happening.
Yeah.
Whereas before they're experiencing it like in hits in a way.
Right. Good.
And then they're fully in it later.
That's an excellent way to articulate it. Yeah. I mean, I think it's an excellent movie. I can't wait to see what he does next. Movies like his two, and The Witch, which I had just recently seen, and The Nightingale, which made me rewatch The Babadook. Like all of these three directors and filmmakers that are responsible for what I just named, they're very cerebral movies, obviously. And we talked about this a little bit in the last video, like the conversation of like, are certain films getting a little too maybe, are we assuming the audience is smarter than they are? Are things getting a little too highbrow? And that's why maybe not getting, the box office success that they deserve. The audience for sure has evolved since Straight Jacket, but like, are we giving the audience too much credit in asking them, or is it too much to ask of the audience to do this much work when they go to the movies?
I think directors like Lars von Trier and the director of Midsommar are kind of at a place where they're making films for a specific, I think ideally they're really targeting a more intellectual viewer, even though they know that in theaters they're going to get unintellectual viewers. But I think that they don't mind that, but not every film really is for everybody.
Very true. I mean, it seems to me they're definitely making the films that they want to make, which is what should be happening, especially if you're not beholden to a major studio like Marvel or Disney, right, where you have to make the types of movies that, are popcorn movies. But I mean, I agree. I think I have
a question for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Who do you think, who do you think is a more talented filmmaker, Lars von Trier or the director of Midsommar, Ari?
Okay, you're asking an impossible question, and I'm only gonna say Lars von Trier because Lars von Trier is more seasoned, and because I'm biased and he happens to have made one of my favorite movies, again, Melancholia. I think Ari Aster is like the next iteration of that type of filmmaker. It's kind of like an unfair question to ask, and it's like, do you...
But my point is that when we go back further to like the same style of director, but a previous one, they're better. And I don't think there are, like all the directors you mentioned, I don't think they're as good as directors of the past. And I don't know why that.
Do you think part of that is the nostalgia that you have within you? Because I have the same thing.
I don't think so, because I think if you ask anyone, to, if you compare, like, because I didn't grow up with like Stanley Kubrick films. That's like way before my time.
Right,
But I
right.
still like have this reverence for him as like a master filmmaker. I just think those people put like more blood, sweat, and tears into it. I mean, maybe that's really unfair to say. Or maybe it's just that they had on their side the novelness of doing things for the first time in a lot of ways.
I think you
It's
just
harder
named
to
it.
make a new like statement or a new vision now, I think.
I think you just named it. I think it's because they had novelty on their side. You know, you can't,
Yeah.
as much as everyone might tote something as being the new Exorcist or the new Rosemary's Baby or the new this or the new that. No, like nobody's ever going
Right.
to match that, or there's never going to be another Shining. It's not going to happen. Stop trying to do it, but also like it goes back to the conversation of like audiences are getting smarter, right? The content's getting better, audiences, culture's getting more evolved as a whole, but at the same time, you know, like the practical effects thing, like we're numb to a face being bad. Some of us are numb to that. So, like
Yeah.
seeing somebody get their head chopped off is like, or repeatedly stabbing themselves in the neck is like, for me, is
Yeah.
like, okay, that was cool, but it's not like crawling out of the theater. I'm vomiting. I can't
Right.
watch this. You know, like life is over. You know, like
Yeah.
I think there's a level of like anesthetization that the culture is at in
Well,
terms of our exposure to violence in
things,
general.
right. Things that they were the most horrific things you could only see in the cinema in the 70s, you now have in prime time on television.
Exactly. So I think you named it. Like it's really, excuse me, like the new Jurassic Parks are a good example of like,
Yes.
there was paradigm shifters in every generation. When you saw Spielberg's and his team's dinosaurs walk on screen for the first time in 1994, that was a paradigm shift. When Toy Story came out, that was a paradigm shift. Now you get a Pixar movie every day. It's like, who cares?
Yeah.
I'm bored.
I have a video to send you that talks about the first Jurassic Park and why it works so much better than all the sequels.
Was it about framing?
Yes. Did you see that video?
I saw it, and it was so spot on.
Yes, it's
Steel
about framing, but also
Steel
about
framing.
like there was a specific set of rules that the characters and that the cinematography and everything followed, and it was very subconscious, but as a viewer, you're watching it, you're getting it,
Right.
you know, subconsciously, but that's why it worked. And I mean, I think that's down to Spielberg, like really knowing what he was doing in a lot of ways.
I'm just turning on my brighter light. I'm listening.
Anyway, so having said all that, and I think we got to the bottom of it with today's directors. But having said all that, I think everyone should really hold new directors' feet to the fire to then at least try to kind of like rise above and usher in a new era of like really of greatness, because it's I just don't see it like overall. But not that there's not like great stuff being made, but you know, overall, I just think that hopefully it just seems like the system that they get into of money and of the studios kind of cranks through people quicker, like young directors. And I don't know if they're not getting as much time. I'm not an expert in this area, but I just hope that, you know, I think as audiences, we should really hold them really accountable and kind of demand really good stuff, because what we're getting is a lot of rehash, like a lot of remakes, a lot of the same old of whatever can turn a quick buck.
Right.
And like, I think that's like not acceptable.
I agree. I think audiences should demand more. I think consumers should demand better quality everything. And we live in the moment of like remakes, reimaginings, revisionings, sequels, this, that, and the other. And the things that are original, like a Midsommar, for example, are still, well, two things. They're obviously not going to be able to compete with Avengers Endgame, right? Like, and nor should they be expected to. But that's the field that they're playing on. But also, you know, somebody that's creating something like Midsommar or, you know, whatever, should have a fair shake at exposure, but we should also still be demanding more of the Ari Asters, the people that are giving us Midsommars, because
yes,
watch it, or even if you don't watch it and you just like listen to interviews or read interviews with him, he'll like rattle off like a list of things that are like sub-references in his movie, you know, not to say Kubrick didn't have references, not to say that King, you know, like everybody has references, right?
Right.
But they're getting more obvious.
Right. And it's interesting, even in music and in film. So musicians and filmmakers now, their references aren't that long ago, and the references are to their own kind. So in other words, a director might be referencing a director from a previous decade, whereas a director like Fritz Lang or Stanley Kubrick, if you go further back, they were maybe referencing things that weren't even in the realm of film. Maybe it was a book. Maybe it was a folk tale. You know what I mean? And the same with musicians now. I think they're referencing more specific and within their genre, which to me is not as interesting. Is if your influences are a little bit broader, that's what makes for better media to me.
Yeah, I think you've just named it again. I mean, with music, you see it, especially with pop music, you see it. Like everything is referencing stuff that's happened within, like, definitely within the 20th century, sometimes even in the 21st century. Like, the references don't go far back enough. They don't invite the audience to like think or do research or be like, oh, that was based on a book, maybe I should go read that book or look at that piece of art or check out that musician. It's all so, it's recent. I mean, Stranger Things, as much as I love Stranger Things, is a prime example. We're referencing something that is only 30-ish years old, you know, in terms of like content, and it's amazing. But it's like, you know, where, and to Ari's credit though, even though he's referencing films that are fairly recent, at least he's introducing references to cultures that or a culture that predates modernity, you know, with Nordic Norse mythology and history and culture and all of that. So yeah, you're naming it, like you're naming everything.
I love it. I love you.
You need to start a podcast.
Well, and for example, like, you know, one of my favorite musicians is Kate Bush. And Kate Bush, she wrote a song based on The Shining, the Stanley Kubrick film, called Get Out of My House. So she was crossing genres like that. She wrote Wuthering Heights about the novel Wuthering Heights. And the fact that she was, and then musically, like chord progression wise and just musically, she was really referencing like folk songs and folk music and Irish traditional music. So not pop music, which she was like living in the 70s and 80s.
Right.
So I think that's what made her like so special and incredibly like unique and interesting to me.
No, she's a very good example. I'm not super well versed in Kate Bush, but from what I've listened to and from what I know, absolutely, she stands alone. I think of Fiona Apple when it comes to modern pop stars, even though you could put her in pop or you could put her in a different category outside of pop. But
amazing, and she would reference Maya Angelou, the poet, all the time.
And for somebody that is roughly my age, maybe give or take a year or two, to be doing what I consider wholly original work in terms of her melodies, in terms of her songwriting, in terms of her lyrics, it does speak to your point that it is possible, like, you know, a millennial or anyone can, you know, reach back a little farther into the archives of time and like make the effort to familiarize themselves with, you know, their heroes or like, you know, the references of their heroes. But yeah, I mean, it's a very good question. Like, is it even possible in kind of the paradigm we're living in to create something completely original? I mean, is it even possible? I don't know.
I think a good step toward it would be like finding inspiration in broader source material. I mean, but who knows? It's really tricky now. I think it's a tricky time.
I mean, yeah, it's very easy to sit on our couches and judge, but we do it so good. So,
yes.
I mean, you know, that's why we get paid the big bucks. But yeah, I agree. Yeah. No, I still would recommend that everyone watch Midsommar and then also watch it again, which we need to do. But before we go, I mean, we can go as long as you want, but I know it's later for you. But I wanted to ask, did you get a chance to watch Mother, and or have you seen The Nightingale yet?
Haven't seen The Nightingale, but I have seen Mother.
Okay, because that was something you hadn't seen last time we talked, so we could save that for next time. But I just wanted to know, did you
like
quick fire? Did you like it?
Mother?
Yeah.
I saw Mother the last time we talked. I hadn't seen The Nightingale though.
Oh, okay.
Fountain, I think, was one that you.
The Fountain. Sorry, thank you. Yeah. Did you get a chance to watch it?
Let's watch. I'll watch The Fountain.
Okay.
Or I'll rent it, whatever.
Okay.
And we'll discuss that one next time, I think, because that was recommended, right? Yeah.
Sorry, I got it twisted. Yes, The Fountain. But you haven't seen The Nightingale yet either, right?
No, okay. But I do love Mother. I mean, Mother is one that I really want to go. There's not a lot of films now where I want to go back and rewatch it. But Mother is just so complex that I really want to, and I thought it was terrific. Yeah, I really want to go back.
I thought so too, and nobody else did, but it's another one of, I think it's fair to say that Darren Aronofsky creates, with the exception of that Noah bullshit, which I'm just gonna forget ever happened, he's created original stuff, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, definitely see The Nightingale, because I want to talk about that like all day. But you've seen The Babadook, right? It's the same director.
See, which one?
Have you seen The Babadook?
Oh, of course, yeah.
So Jennifer Kent is the director of The Nightingale. So same filmmaker.
Okay, so I had mixed feelings about Babadook.
So do I.
We'll
save it. We'll table it.
We do Nightingale, yeah.
We'll table it. Okay, so do you have something? I need you to recommend something for me now for homework.
Okay, can I think about it and text it to you?
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll do that, because I want to really put a little thought into it.
Well, on that note, I just want to say, from my face hugger to yours, I really appreciate you spending the evening with me, because I miss you terribly, and I know it's late for you, so yeah. Yes.